So give us the latest. I see that Rivera seems to have turned at least a PR corner regarding Haskins, kind of saying they're going into camp, if camp ever occurs, with the idea that it's his job to lose. I think we all knew this, but we were kind of waiting for Rivera to say it.
For sure. And I think it's one of those actions speak louder than words. And when they traded for Kyle Allen, whether you like the potential of Kyle Allen or not, it gives them a viable way to proclaim that there's going to be competition, that Haskins isn't just given this job, but, Ron can look at Dwayne and say, listen, this kid, Kyle Allen, started for me, has won games for me, so you got to be ready to go. It also helps that Kyle Allen will know the offense, and to your point, I mean, depending how much practice time they get, Kyle Allen already knows it. Dwayne's going to be having to learn Scott Turner and all the new terminology. But I think if you're Dwayne, you better win this competition. I mean, the job is his to lose, I think, more so than he has to go out and win it.
Right.
And, there's a lot of consternation if Dwayne's the guy and maturity issues and whatever else. But I think some Redskins fans need to allow that maybe Dwayne will come out and be pretty good, or at least as good as what Sam Darnold has done with the Jets and some of these young quarterbacks that get a really long leash. Just because I think the way his rookie year went, Dwayne was, the coaching staff didn't invest a lot of time in him. Then they did, and he got on the field, and he looked pretty bad. But by the end of the year, he seemed to be turning a corner, and I think he'll get every opportunity to be the guy. And as long as he has some level of success, I think he'll stay on the field. I think if he completely bombs out and Kyle Allen knows the offense and they can go to him, they will. But I don't think it's going to happen early, and I think Dwayne still is the same guy that threw for 50 touchdowns at Ohio State. He has talent. He has a big arm. He's way more mobile than people gave him credit for this time last year in the pre-draft process. I think he can play, and I think he'll get a really good opportunity to show that.
Here's the problem. I think that the upside is there, and I'm rooting for him, and I think we have to stick with this. The problem is this layoff is not helping a young quarterback who's going into a new system, who's got to learn new terminology. Half the roster is going to be turned over. He needs the reps.
All these fields are closed. Where is he even working out?
And then going working out at Bullis with a couple of high school kids. God bless them. That's something, but it's not. You know what I mean? This is going to hamper the development. There's no question. It'll hurt all of them, but it's going to hurt Haskins more than it does Aaron Rodgers.
Totally. And, combine the development with the new coaching staff, just the FaceTime and kind of the relationship building. You know what I mean? That stuff is important between a coach and an offensive coordinator and a new quarterbacks coach and new receivers and all of those things. And, Ron had said, I think in Indy at the Combine, that Dwayne was going to get the receivers together down in Florida. They were going to do, basically those workouts that get people so excited on social media, and you can argue how much they actually matter.
Right.
But, you can't do any of that stuff now. So the entire NFL is in the same circumstances where they're limited in what they can do beyond just kind of working out on their own. And so that's going to impact the whole league. But Dwayne, a second-year quarterback that looks like the presumptive starter, that has to learn a new offense and learn new coaching, it's a huge hindrance. And there's nothing you can do about it. This isn't like, he had to have off-season elbow surgery and it's his fault or it's even like his bad luck. This is just the Twilight Zone.
I'm just concerned that they, for Haskins and Kyle Allen, whoever. Kyle Allen had McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, good tight end. He had some good weapons last year, and he still struggled a little bit. You got Haskins with pretty much the same guys from last year. I know you're going to draft certain players, and I'm able to draft a receiver or two, but all of those guys are the same with the exception of Peyton Barber and Cody Latimer, and you can't rely on those guys. They just really haven't. They tried to go out and get a tight end, but they ended up with Richard Rodgers and Logan Thomas. There's just no weapons right now.
Yeah, you're not fired up for J.D. McKissick?
He's a nice third down back. He's got some talent.
He doesn't put you over the top.
But I think we know they wanted to add weapons. I had a Skins decision maker in Indy say we have to get more playmakers, and they understand that. They took a big swing on Amari Cooper. They didn't land him. He wanted to stay in Dallas. He took less money to stay in Dallas. Austin Hooper said that the Redskins were probably the other team besides Cleveland to make a run at him. I've kind of heard that they might not have offered nearly the same money Cleveland did, but it doesn't matter now because he's in Cleveland regardless. I think on one hand, it's good that they were measured and disciplined in their approach to kind of not just pay the next guy because they didn't get the top guy they wanted, but at the same time, you're really about to roll out the same offense that came in bottom of the league in yards and points. So maybe it'll look better with a new scheme and a little bit more health. If you can get Darius Geis on the field let's not be greedy. Let's say you get him on the field for 10 games. He's shown that he can make big impacts when he's out there. They're going to draft people, but they don't have that many draft picks right now.
Right.
You're basically, because they're not going to draft, odds are they're not going to draft an offensive guy with the second overall pick. It's going to be Chase Young. No. So
maybe they can get an extra pick with Trent if that ever happens.
Ideally. And the organization, everyone I've talked to, they are going to be steadfast that they're not giving Trent away. They're willing to be patient. They'll take it to the draft. There's no hurry for the team because typically this Trent thing would be a big distraction for players, right? When the media descends on Redskins Park for OTAs or minicamp, and every reporter's asking every player about Trent, and that's just not going to happen. There's no reporters, there's no OTAs, there's no minicamp. So time is kind of on their side, and I think based on everything that Trent's agent, Vincent Taylor, has done, it would seem pretty logical that he thinks he has a team with a deal for Trent ready to go, but clearly that team's not giving the Redskins the compensation they want. I think it's pretty obvious if you kind of read between the lines on everything coming out that Ron Rivera is not going to give away Trent Williams. So I think that compensation is going to have to increase, or we're looking at a very awkward, run like week before the draft.
Have you talked to anybody within the league that is started to verbalize to you that they're really nervous about this year even starting?
I have not, and I really haven't gotten that sense at all. I certainly think nothing's going to happen till training camp, which is the end of July. I have kind of heard that you might have to consider some secondary sites for games and stuff.
Right.
Just if you think about New York, are you really going to be able to put 70,000 people in the Meadowlands right now? And the good thing is that there's a lot of time. There's 6 months or 5 months before there's going to be a football game played. But when I saw did you see Kirk Herbstreit's comments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was jarring to me because that's a guy that I don't look at. I'm a big fan of Kirk Herbstreit. I don't consider him like political or provocative or he's just a football guy. He wants to analyze football, watch football, and he's pretty much always an upbeat dude. So for him to say he doesn't see how they could play this fall, I found alarming. I think one thing I've learned just with free agency over the last couple of weeks is it seems like fans really need it or certainly want it, kind of the distraction and the discussion around it and everything that happens. And to your point earlier in our conversation, like it gives fans some sense of normalcy. Like, all right, this is what usually happens right now, so this feels right. Maybe colleges will have a harder time getting people together, getting college football going because, whether you believe it or not, those guys are amateurs, and technically the games aren't supposed to be to make money and all these other things. So maybe your first priority has to be to protect student athletes. The NFL is kind of a different beast. These are really well-paid players. Think about this, too. Those players get paid when they play games. They don't get paid otherwise.
Right.
And I think the players, that would get very interesting if they want to play or not when, you've got a $12 million contract that's divided up into 16 game checks.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, with that new CBA being approved, the reason it was approved is because 60% of the league does play on those minimum type contracts, right? I mean,
right.
There aren't that many guys making Aaron Rodgers money, but the Aaron Rodgers of the world voted against it. So you're right. I mean, the guys who are making the smaller checks, the Trace McSorleys of the world, they need to play because he's not getting paid if they're not playing games. Other guys can withstand it, but most of the guys in the league can't.
Right. And those guys don't have endorsement money to fall back on.
Right.
I mean, this is their livelihood, and let's not. I don't want to. There's a lot of people whose livelihood is being threatened right now, and you don't want to make light of that because I mean there are real economic impacts to this thing across the country that are a much bigger deal than what could happen with football in 5 months. And I'm not trying to, conflate those two things, but I think players will want to play, and the NFL didn't even move back free agency, which is a complete arbitrary date. They didn't move back the beginning of the league year, which are completely arbitrary dates that they kind of just pull out of thin air. There's no real reason they had to start in mid-March outside of that's just what we do, and we're the NFL, and nobody tells us what to do. So based on that, I would kind of see them continuing with that pattern. Although, I mean, we're seeing changes. The draft is still going to go on, but it's not going to be the spectacle that it would have been. OTAs, there's nobody at team facilities. All these contracts right now have a coronavirus clause in there. There's no physicals happening. So there have been changes, but eventually, I mean, their product is guys on the field in helmets and shoulder pads, and I think it'll happen.